On a biting November evening in the year 1890, a screaming gale from the north sweeps across the knife-edge granite crests of the Swiss Alps, driving sheets of needle-sharp ice against the snowbound peak. 2,500 meters above sea level, the world is reduced to a roaring white vortex of frost and shadow, where the ambient temperature plunges far below freezing, and the air grows thin, dry, and bitterly cold. Perched precariously on a sheer rock ledge, anchored against hurricane-force winds by heavy forged iron cables bolted deep into bare granite, sits a solitary high-altitude meteorological observatory. Small multi-paned storm windows, crusted thick with layers of feathery rime ice, cast a pale amber square of lamp light onto the wind-scoured snowdrifts outside. Inside this isolated stone fortress, two men hunch over brass instruments and ink-stained logbooks, recording the subtle shifts of atmospheric pressure that govern the storm systems of Western Europe. They carry out their grueling scientific vigil in total isolation, entirely unaware that within less than 3 weeks, a legendary winter blizzard will sever their copper telegraph wire, bury their stone sanctuary under 10 meters of mountain snow, and test the ultimate limits of human endurance at the very edge of the inhabited sky. The blizzard hammers against the stone masonry, hurling winds that whistle through seams in the mortar. For months, these men see no other faces, living cut off from human society below. Music, this reconstruction of a Swiss Alps high mountain observatory in the year 1890, was created with artificial intelligence based on historical studies and records of the period. Before going further, consider subscribing to the channel Rewind History and leaving a like so more lost worlds can return to the light through this work. Stay tuned as we step past the ice-crusted copper cupola to witness the extreme solitary lives of meteorologists braving hurricane winds, frostbite, and total solitude to record the secrets of the sky. To comprehend life inside this high-altitude outpost, one must examine how late 19th century engineering carved a scientific sanctuary out of bare alpine rock, rising high above the mist-filled valleys of the Swiss plateau, where dark pine forests give way to vertical cliff faces and perpetual glacial ice. The observatory stands as an isolated monument to human ambition, constructed by the Swiss Meteorological Institute under the direction of pioneering meteorologists. The station is built from massive blocks of gray granite quarried directly from the surrounding ridge, bound together with frost-resistant mortar made of slaked lime, fine river sand, and ground volcanic ash. To withstand winds exceeding 150 kilometers per hour, the triple-planked pine walls are insulated with thick layers of dried wood shavings, sawdust, and heavy woolen felt lining, preventing indoor heat from escaping into the freezing abyss outside. The double-pitched roof is sheathed in heavy copper plates, capped by a hemispherical observation cupola, and grounded against terrifying mountain lightning storms by thick iron lightning rods extending down into bedrock. Double-glazed storm windows, reinforced with heavy oak shutters and iron latch bars, protect the living quarters from flying ice particles. Inside, on the ground floor, a massive cast-iron stove fueled by anthracite coal rests on a slate slab, radiating life-saving warmth through narrow pine-paneled rooms. Adjacent to the living quarters sits the instrument room, housing delicate scientific apparatus. A Fortin mercury barometer suspended from gimbal rings to ensure absolute vertical alignment, hair hygrometers, self-recording Richard Freer's thermograph drums with clockwork gears, and a copper Morse telegraph key connected to a single wire running down the precipice to the valley below. The air inside carries a distinct sensory profile. The dry, metallic heat of burning coal, kerosene lamp oil, wet woolen coats drying near the hearth, carbolic soap, lard, and the sharp tang of ozone generated by electrical storms. Over this scent hangs an unforgettable acoustic environment dominated by the relentless roar of wind shrieking through guy wires, the rhythmic ticking of clockwork recording drums, the click of the telegraph sounder, and the deep groaning of timber beams under the weight of mountain snow. The structure is a masterpiece of engineering, driven by heavy steel pins into granite bedrock to anchor against seismic tremors and avalanches that thunder down adjacent couloirs. Long before dawn breaks over the jagged horizon, the daily life cycle of the high mountain observatory begins in freezing shadow. At 4 o'clock in the morning, while the peak remains locked in sub-zero darkness, the assistant observer wakes in his narrow wooden bunk beneath thick woolen blankets. Shivering in the drafty room, where frost sparkles on the interior wall mortar, he strikes a steel file against flint, catching the spark on charred linen tinder to ignite a wooden splint tipped with brimstone. With this flickering flame, he kindles the iron stove using dried peat sods, pine kindling, and anthracite coal blocks, coaxing a warm orange glow from the firebox. Downstairs, the station porter fetches a bucket of packed snow from the entryway airlock, melting it over the stove eyelet to provide water for morning washing and cooking. Under this single roof, a disciplined social hierarchy prevails that reflects the formal academic structure of late Victorian science. At the top sits the chief meteorologist or observer, a university-educated scientist trained in physics and barometry from Zurich, responsible for exact calculations, log-keeping, and instrument calibration. Beside him works the assistant observer, proficient in telegraphy, mathematical reduction, and weather observation, while the porter handles heavy physical chores, fuel management, and snow clearing. This small team lives under conditions of intense physical compression, echoing the solitary spirit of early polar explorers who risked their lives at the frontiers of geographical knowledge. Inspired by the pioneering efforts of researchers like Heinrich von Wild, who established Switzerland's mountain weather network on peaks like the Sentes. In the morning hours, every task is executed with precision. The porter measures out anthracite coal from jute sacks in the vestibule, ensuring the stove burns at an optimal rate without wasting fuel. By 5 in the morning, the men gather near the stove to prepare for their first outdoor observation. Washing is a brief and icy ritual using lukewarm snow water drawn from the stove pot, followed by thorough drying with coarse linen towels to prevent skin from cracking in the freezing mountain wind. Following ablutions, the chief observer recites a brief morning devotion or reads a passage from a scientific treatise before gear preparation begins. The material dress code is strictly specialized, engineered for survival at extreme altitude. Each man wears heavy long underwear knit from raw Glarus sheep wool, followed by thick Loden woolen trousers, a double-breasted tweed tunic known as a woljapf, and a windproof canvas smock. On their feet, they wear hand-knit woolen stockings inside heavy leather mountain boots studded with iron trichony nails, called nagelschuh, which bite firmly into glaze ice, supplemented by heavy leather gaiters, or gamaschen, wrapped tightly around their calves to keep out snow drifts. Before stepping outside, they don knitted wool balaclavas, broad-brimmed felt hats, and protective goggles fitted with tinted green glass to ward off blinding glare and snow blindness. Their hands are encased in inner woolen gloves covered by thick horsehair mittens tied to their sleeves with leather cords. This elaborate armor protects skin from instant frostbite during exposure to Arctic winds. Every layer of clothing serves a purpose, trapping insulating air pockets between woolen fibers while permitting perspiration to evaporate. The nagelschuh boots are oiled daily with tallow to maintain flexibility. As pale twilight illuminates the cloud sea below the peak, the men sit down at the pine table for their first meal of the day. The breakfast is hearty, engineered to sustain long hours of physical labor in sub-zero temperatures. They consume bowls of hot oatmeal porridge sweetened with condensed milk, slices of dense, dark rye bread known as Walliser Roggenbrot spread with salted Alpine butter, and slabs of hard Esperance cheese. Small trenchers hold cured lard and paper-thin slices of air-dried beef, known as Bündnerfleisch, seasoned with sea salt and mountain herbs. In place of perishable fresh milk, they drink scalding chicory coffee or black tea laced with a splash of cherry brandy, known as Kirschwasser, to stimulate internal circulation. The global and regional supply chains sustaining this high outpost require immense foresight. Every autumn, before early winter snows block mountain passes, long trains of pack mules and sturdy porters equipped with wooden backpack frames, or kraxen, haul tons of anthracite coal, kerosene tins, dried legumes, smoked meats, and flour up steep zigzag trails to the summit storerooms, stocking the station for 6 months of total winter blockade. Provisioning such an isolated peak demands meticulous accounting. Every pound of coal, tin of lard, and sack of flour is recorded in the station ledger, ensuring emergency rations remain intact should blockades extend late into spring. With breakfast finished, the core scientific work begins as the clock strikes 6. Every 3 hours, day and night, the observers must record a complete meteorological profile mandated by the Swiss Central Meteorological Station in Zurich. The assistant observer straps on a heavy leather safety harness attached to an iron lifeline fixed along the snowbound ridge. Pushing open the heavy airlock door against screaming wind, he steps onto the ice-crusted observation deck. Battling blinding snow drift, he navigates to the wooden Stevenson screen mounted on iron stilts above the snowline. Opening the louvered doors, he reads maximum and minimum mercury thermometers, notes wet bulb psychrometer values, and checks hair hygrometers. Using a wooden mallet, he carefully beats away thick rime ice that has frozen the metal cups of the Robinson anemometer, allowing the cups to spin freely in the gale. He clears the funnel of the wild pattern snow gauge, measures snow depth against a graduated wooden rod, and checks the Campbell-Stokes sunshine recorder, a solid glass sphere that burns a dark track onto a curved paper card whenever the sun pierces the clouds. Operating weather instruments under Arctic gales requires physical coordination. The observer keeps his body low, bracing against the lifeline while handling delicate glass thermometer tubes with gloved fingers. Returning inside, dripping with melted snow, the assistant hands his frostbitten notes to the chief meteorologist, who transcribes the raw figures into official observation logbooks. The chief applies mathematical correction factors for temperature and altitude, reducing raw barometric pressure to sea level equivalents using logarithmic tables. Once verified, the observer sits at the telegraph table, opening the electrical circuit to Zurich. His fingers move briskly over the copper Morse key, sending rhythmic dits and dahs down the line. Barometric pressure, air temperature, wind velocity, humidity, cloud classification, and precipitation type. This vital mountain data is immediately integrated into synoptic weather maps across Europe, warning lowland cities, agricultural valleys, and shipping ports of approaching storm fronts originating high over the Alps. The transmission of weather data down the mountain wire is a critical link in Europe's emerging meteorological network. The telegraph key clicks rhythmically, transforming mountain wind speeds and barometric pressure drops into digital impulses that travel at the speed of light down to lowland forecasting bureaus. At noon, the men gather once again for their main meal of the day, the middagsessen. The kitchen fills with the savory aroma of boiling broth and stew. The centerpiece is a heavy iron pot of pea soup, or Erbsensuppe, enriched with salt pork, dried vegetables, and garlic, served with thick slices of rye bread and boiled potatoes stored in the frost-free cellar. The men drink hot mulled wine infused with cloves and cinnamon, discussing cloud formations and barometer trends. After dining, the endless cycle of observations resumes at 3-hour intervals. In the late afternoon, as the winter sun dips below the jagged horizon, casting pink alpenglow across vast snowfields, the observers perform specialized optical experiments, measuring solar radiation with actinometers and observing atmospheric electricity with electrometers while recording halo phenomena around the setting sun. The afternoon hours are spent conducting specialized solar and atmospheric observations that contribute to fundamental meteorological theory. As cloud layers drift below the summit, the observers document optical halos, sun dogs, and complex light refraction patterns caused by suspended ice crystals. As evening descends, the station transitions into quiet routine. The men gather in the pine-paneled main room around the glowing coal stove. They smoke long wooden pipes packed with coarse shag tobacco, drink tea, and engage in quiet recreation. The chief meteorologist reads scientific journals like the Meteorologist Zeitschrift, or writes correspondence to be sent down when the trail opens, while the assistant mends torn leather gaiters or sharpens crampon points. They play games of chess on a wooden board, listening to the roar of the gale outside. At 9 o'clock, the final scheduled evening observation is taken. The assistant steps onto the freezing deck under a canopy of brilliant stars, recording cloud cover and temperature before locking the heavy storm doors for the night. In the evening solitude of the main room, the harsh realities of mountain isolation are softened by quiet intellectual pursuits and camaraderie. By the light of hanging kerosene lamps, the men record their personal reflections in private journals, maintaining mental resilience against the unrelenting storm. Inside the darkened observatory, the final nocturnal checks are completed. The chief observer inspects the Fortin barometer one last time, banks the coal stove with fine anthracite slack, and turns down the kerosene lamps. Outside, the night wind howls around copper roof plates, but inside, the heavy granite walls hold fast. This extreme lifestyle of 19th century mountain meteorology represents a golden era of empirical science, yet technological evolution was already approaching. Within a few decades, automatic radio transmitters, heated electronic sensors, and orbital satellites would replace the need for human observers to endure freezing Alpine winter blockades, turning these historic stone outposts into automated stations or mountain shelters. As the midnight hours approach, the observatory enters a quiet state of suspended animation. The heavy stone walls absorb the internal warmth of the banked stove, preserving a safe temperature while the storm outside continues to rage across the jagged summit. Yet today, preserved in the archives of the Swiss Federal Office of Meteorology and Climatology, handwritten observation logbooks, crisp glassplate photographs, and barograph cards survive as permanent testaments to human dedication. Archaeologists and historians exploring these high summits still find iron guy cable anchors, copper telegraph brackets, and broken glass thermometer fragments embedded in rock and ice. These tangible artifacts connect us directly across 3 centuries to the brave scientists who lived above the clouds in 1890, braving freezing storms to illuminate the mysteries of the atmosphere. As we step back into the shadow of history, we are reminded of the enduring human capacity to extract knowledge from the wild elements, transforming icy isolation into a testament of scientific discovery that continues to guide our understanding of the heavens. These historic mountain observatories stand as eternal symbols of scientific devotion and human perseverance. The detailed weather records compiled by these lonely observers continue to provide invaluable baseline data for modern climate scientists studying long-term atmospheric trends.